Hello, I'm Julie Swenson, Managing Director of Forward Theater Company in Madison, Wisconsin.
And I'm Mike Fisher, Milwaukee-based theater writer and dramaturg.
And I'm Jen Uphoff-Gray, founder and artistic director of Forward Theater Company. And this is Theater Forward, a monthly conversation about theater from a local, regional, and national perspective. From Madison to Manhattan, we're excited to share insights into our own company while exploring issues surrounding theater in the Midwest and around the country. Welcome to episode 133 of Theater Forward.
Great to be here.
In this episode, we are breaking down the process behind building our recently announced 2026-2027 season slate. How and why did we choose these plays? What factors were front of mind this time around? We have this conversation every year once our season's been announced, and hopefully it illustrates the shifting season planning needs in the regional theater. So I'm going to just get us started by talking about the theme that we have assigned to this season. And for those who haven't listened to our season selection podcasts in the past, I just want to clarify that the theme of the season is always something that we create after we have picked the plays. We look for plays that we like, that we want to produce here, that we think build a varied and interesting and diverse slate. And then we look at them and we think, what is a through line here? What's the connective tissue? What's a good way to talk about these plays as a grouping and not as four individual pieces of art? And this season had a really clear through line for us that I thought was pretty cool. And we have dubbed it our Past is Prologue season, because even though these are all quite new plays, one is a world premiere, another one is going to be only the second or maybe third production, et cetera, all of these plays are set in different eras of the past. And I think that they are going to give us a really interesting opportunity to reflect on where we are right now as a country, as Americans, by considering where we have been. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about our Past is Prologue season, or as I like to call it, our History is Here to Help season. And I'll just keep talking for a second, and then I'm going to really happily and gratefully pass it off to you two. But I have been elected to talk about the first play of our season, which was also the first play we committed to. And that is our world premiere of the play with music, Steady She Goes by Erica Berman. This is a play that we committed to several years ago, actually, because as listeners may already be aware, 2026 is World Premiere Wisconsin year here in our state. And as a founder of the festival, we got really excited about the idea of doing not one, but two major world premieres during this calendar year. So we have just closed the final main stage production of our 25-26 season, which was Lady Disdain, the Lauren Gunderson rolling world premiere that we mounted. And we're going to open our upcoming season with Steady She Goes. Very excited for back-to-back world premieres. This one is about a true story that had been sort of lost to history for a long time, about Mary Ann Brown Patton, who in the 1850s was a young, very young bride who was accompanying her captain husband on a clipper ship sailing from New York down the coast, all the way around South America through Cape Horn and all the way up to San Francisco to deliver cargo. Her husband fell ill mid-voyage. She had been studying navigation, and she wound up captaining the ship safely all the way to port on the West Coast and became a bit of a cause célèbre in the media. And I love this play. I am so excited to share the story of this remarkable young woman. And my God, it's a play with sea shanties. And who isn't going to enjoy that? So that is the first show of our season.
And I look forward to finding an opportunity to get our patrons singing sea shanties too. So that's so exciting. So Mary Brown Patton was a very strong woman. That's what that play is about. And then we have the next one where seemingly not a strong woman until the plot unravels. In 1938, a man named Patrick Hamilton wrote this play called Angel Street. And no one's really heard of Angel Street until it was made a movie in 1944 and retitled Gaslight. Now, for from ever, the play is called Gaslight. We have a new version by Stephen Dietz. And just as a reminder, if you haven't seen that incredible movie with Ingrid Bergman and Charles Boyer and Joseph Cotton, Mrs. Manningham is maybe being driven crazy by Mr. Manningham. The gas lights go off every time Mr. Manningham leaves the house. It is literally the term where being gaslit comes from. We use that phrase all the time now. It has become part of our vernacular, and this is the source material. So it's a mystery. It's evil versus good. It is, yes, past, but so present and so wonderful. I did this play a million years ago as Mrs. Manningham. I am so excited to see Phoebe Gonzalez do it for Forward Theater.
Well, and no disrespect to Patrick Hamilton, who also wrote the play Rope, which most of us know from the Alfred Hitchcock movie. I mean, the play in its original form, Julie, that you did is brilliant. But what Dietz did is amazing in terms of maintaining the bones of that original,
Right,
while giving it a sort of, not with a wink, more, it's better than that. I mean, sort of a tougher, sort of proto-feminist read that's all there in the Hamilton play, but that he brings closer to the surface. Reviewing the Northlight production in Chicago last year, which I thought was terrific. Chris Jones said it's Patrick Hamilton meets Ibsen, and I think that's right.
Yeah.
You're gonna have echoes of A Doll's House going off in your mind in watching this play, and that's as much as I should say.
I love Stephen Dietz's writing. I've loved his writing since I was a young intern in New York City, reading, scripts off the slush pile, and came across Lonely Planet and thought, who is this? So to be able to do one of his newer works is really exciting.
Exciting. Yep.
All right. Well, next on our slate, in our winter slot, we're going back to Rajiv Joseph. So love this writer. Really so happy with the production of his King James that we did, a year and a half ago, and just could not resist coming back to him with his newer play, Dakar 2000. Which is, I don't want to call it a spy thriller necessarily, because it doesn't adhere to all of the hallmarks of that genre, but it is an absolutely riveting cat and mouse two-hander that takes place in Senegal on the very cusp of Y2K, late December of 1999. And our two characters are a woman in sort of her middle years who is an employee of the U.S. State Department, and a young man, also American, who is a volunteer with the Peace Corps. And their paths cross, and we spend the rest of the play wondering who is using whom, who is in charge, who is telling the truth, who is not. And it's so captivating. And if you zoom out for the sort of macro view on it, it is an unbelievable look at the American presence overseas, and the perhaps sometimes vast gulf between our intentions and our actions.
Well, yeah. Go ahead, Julie.
No, I was just going to say, cat and mouse is quite right, except the cat changes and so does the mouse.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back and forth on that. That's the part I find the most fascinating about this play.
Well, and this is a sort of forward sweet spot, but despite the fact that this play has some real humor in it and is light on its feet, it's also if you're looking for them and they're there without you being beaten over the head with it, there are some very deep, dark themes about the kinds of stories we tell each other, what it means to tell the truth, what is history, and so for a season that's dedicated to interrogating the past and the way we use it or misappropriate it, to think about the way in which we tell stories about who we are as a country and the problem and myth of American exceptionalism. You're going to get all of that too, wrapped up in a
Mhm.
spy thriller. I mean, it's Rajiv Joseph, right? I mean, he can do
Yep.
everything.
Agree.
So, well, that's teeing me up for another sort of. We
Is.
start the season with the 1850s. We're going to end it in the 1950s with Jim Sherman's amazing play, First Lady of Television. Have you heard of Gertrude Berg? Silence, because you know what? We've all heard of
Right.
Lucille Ball, but there would be no Lucille Ball without Gertrude Berg. She truly was the first lady of television, as the play's title tells us, not just in terms of being sort of first in that kind of a role, but being dominant in 1950 at a moment when the Red Scare was starting to make itself felt very strongly within the artistic field and world. Um, we know about the Hollywood blacklist. We know less about is the pressure that was placed on shows like hers that included people who had taken radical positions in the past. You know, that at that time, as in this time, is enough to get you branded as part of the radical left or as a communist. And the pressure that was placed on her to let go of one of her actors, the great Philip Loeb, who was in the show that she was doing on TV with him. It was a sitcom comedy called The Goldbergs. You may have heard of that. Sort of the mother of all sitcoms in more ways than one. And it's the story of what happens when you feel the pressure of censorship and the relationship between those political currents and the art that you're trying to make and the stories you're trying to tell. And who better than to be playing Gertrude Berg for us than the incomparable, amazing, awesome Emily Glick, who thinks hard about these questions. I mean, it's one of the things that drew me to her from the moment I met her. So in addition to being a fabulous actor, this is going to be right in her wheelhouse thematically as well. And I swear to you all, we did not pick this play after Brendan Carr and the FCC decided once again to go after Jimmy Kimmel, but it is timely for some of the same reasons.
Yeah, I am going to have the privilege of directing this one, and I am just beyond excited about it. Both because of the sort of fun aspects of working on this script and the more profound ones. The fun of watching a bunch of actors essentially rehearsing for the live broadcast of a TV sitcom,
Right.
and how does that look on stage is very fun for me as a director. I am really looking forward to the choreography of that. And at the same time, ultimately, what this play is about is the burden of leadership, the burden of responsibility, of being the person who has to make the final decision when there is no good decision to make, when there is no decision you can make in which no one gets hurt, where you are having to weigh what's the least harmful of different harmful options, because Lord knows that is the world we live in. And I think watching this character live through the difficulty of that decision making process is going to be cathartic, maybe instructive, certainly empathy building, and I'm really excited about it.
And there are commercials for Sanka.
Yeah.
And
which
Yes.
is how some of us got hooked on coffee a million years ago at 7 years
Right.
old. In case any of you are detecting a theme here, does it surprise any of our listeners who know Jen Gray's work that she is excited about the idea of a play within a play? This person who has given us things like Mr. Burns, Act 3, the Farnsworth Invention, and Lady Disdain. Do I detect a theme here so that somebody out there, some aspiring graduate student in the UW Theater Department department, or yours truly when he writes the annals of forward theater someday? Do you think that maybe this will be something we have to talk about? Yes, it will be something we have to talk about.
A whole chapter.
A whole chapter.
Get on that, Mike.
I love that this season is going to take us from the age of sail, the golden age of sail, through the actual gilded age, jumping ahead a little bit to Y2K, and then back to the golden age of television. I mean, it's really, these are rich fields for us to make some art in. And I'm thrilled by it. And we have some fabulous artists that are lined up to work with us. I just want to mention we have 2 directors returning to us as our guest directors next season. First of all, Brian Cowing, the artistic director of Children's Theater of Madison here in town, is going to be directing Steady She Goes. He directed the brilliant Flying Lovers of Vitebsk on our stage. He is an unbelievably gifted artist, and I think absolutely the perfect person to create this play with music, these workers on the ship, the ebb and flow and the rhythm of that story. And Mary McDonald Kerr is coming back to direct Dakar 2000 for us. Mary was last with us as a director for Mary Jane, which we did pre-pandemic. Also, little side note, I just want to say I love yet again the illustration of how the work being done in regional theaters feeds to Broadway. It's not just that plays debut on Broadway and come to the regions, which they do often, but we did Mary Jane in our 10th season, and it just was on Broadway last year. Marjorie Prime, which we did in our 9th season, was just done this past year on Broadway, and got some folks nominated for some Tony Awards. And I love that the local audiences can say, "Oh, I saw that ages ago,"
right?
And it proves how symbiotic this ecosystem is. Yes, the regions need Broadway to help bring this sort of national spotlight to what we do. It helps raise awareness of certain titles. But the Broadway, the commercial theater needs the regions as this incubator of powerful new stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also need to have a conversation in this country about, in the way that our entire season is doing, about what history means. I mean, to use the analogy from theater to politics, are we going to be given a top-down version of what constitutes the American dream and the American experiment in American history of the sort that is being foisted on us right now? Are we going to surrender to the apparatchiks in power in this country, what it means to tell a story about what is great about this country? Or are we going to claim for ourselves the right to be patriots in our own way and be proud of the traditions within this country's history, which are subversive, which are bottom up, which live the life of we the people? And that's what, in different ways, each of these stories is either about or asking about. And that's something that comes from the regions too. Some of the great political movements in this country were born in the Midwest, and there's a reason for that.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, beautifully said, Mike. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was thinking a little bit, maybe we can chat for a couple minutes about some of the factors that went into our decision-making process in building this season. Obviously, first and foremost, it was our traditional process of looking for new and newer plays, having them read by our literary committee, having them read by our advisory company, having deep discussions about the pros and cons of any given script, looking for a balanced slate. We start with the script, very much. But there were some things that we were, every season, there are things that we are thinking about, things that we are looking for as we make our decisions. I know that one thing that I've been thinking about of late is the interest from the audience that we've been sensing in what I would call genre pieces. I see this happening in literature as well, and in television as well. Like, I think whether it's mystery, whether it's romance, I look at the success of our productions of Murder Girl and Lady Disdain, which interestingly, we did some math in the office. In Forward 17 season history, our top 2 best attended shows are the 2 musicals that we added a week run to. So obviously there were more performances of those shows. Those were our top 2 most attended shows. After that were Murder Girl and Lady Disdain, both of which were world premieres, brand new scripts, but also pieces that celebrated genre. And I've been really struck by that, how much people enjoy coming into a piece of theater as they do a book or a television show, knowing sort of, here are the rules of the genre. Now let's see, how do we interpret them? How do we disrupt them? When you sort of have some expectations and then you see how they are either met or thwarted, I think the audience really enjoys that ride. Certainly I enjoy it artistically, helping create that. And so those thoughts certainly led to some of the enthusiasm I felt for plays like Gaslight and Dakar 2000. The sort of different thrillers, both of them, but in very different ways. So that was certainly a thought I was having as we were reading these scripts.
It's also, I know we've talked about this a bunch, you and I, Jen, about the world premiere and how our audiences have ridden with us, jumped on to see something they've never heard of before, can't find out what the reviews said or what audiences have to say about it, and are just willing to jump all in. And then it does give us the courage, knowing that, to program. Actually, I mean, we've heard of Gaslight, but all 3 of these shows are relatively new. Steady She Goes is going to be a world premiere, and how fun that is, knowing that our audiences will go along for, I don't know, the boat ride with us on that one. Because that could be risky for a company that isn't used to doing world premieres.
What I love, and I've already sort of said a version of this, but to steal from some musical that you may have all heard of. I mean, what I love about our season is it's about who lives, who dies, who gets to tell the story, right? I mean, this is a season that unapologetically, as genre fiction always does, puts story first. And that's super important in a moment right now where English departments and liberal arts colleges are under attack, where the idea that studying stories isn't an important part of what it means for us to come together as a country and decide what we share and what we think is important, even though it is through stories that we tell the story of ourselves. For us to foreground that, for theater in general to foreground that, feels super important. And I may be the person who, as you've heard me on this podcast, loves the stuff with 84 metaphors and like every poetic this and that and the next thing that's, really weird. And I saw a show last night in Chicago about a guy who falls in love with a fish. It's a world premiere. It's fantastic. But this season is a season about story. And that's always been, from the moment I've met her, near and dear and at the core of who Jen Gray is as an artistic director and as a human being. And it's nice to see that sort of foregrounded in the way that this season's going to foreground it.
That's lovely, Mike. Thank you. Those are the sort of, dare I say, story-driven, thematic aspects that went into building this season. But I'm always, excited to talk about some of the pragmatic factors as well, because those are very much a part of our thought process when we are programming here. Some of it is purely on the level of how many actors collectively do we need over the course of the season? How big do the sets need to be? Are we balancing a really big show with something that's more intimate so that we can keep our costs in check? That kind of thing is always a factor. And we're also, we, as I said a moment ago, we have experimented with sometimes extending runs when we've done a musical. We've done very few of those, but we set a lot of box office records this past season. Audiences here in Madison, at least, are really, really back. Our shows are full. The audience is enthusiastic. We are hitting new records on our subscribers and on our single ticket buyers. I am knocking on all of the wood because we take none of this for granted. Mm-hmm. But it does seem like we have some opportunities to further grow our audience in the coming years. And we are going to be experimenting with extending some of our runs, not just for a big musical, but for the occasional play that we think has the opportunity to bring in more single ticket buyers to build some real word of mouth here in the community. And so part of our process in building the season was identifying, do we have a couple of shows that we think that we feel confident we could extend a run on? And that's a big new venture for us. But as we've talked about in past episodes, as we look at keeping regional nonprofit theater alive, especially in the current time where, there really is next to no government support, corporate support is disappearing, foundation support is deeply limited. We really have two main sources financially to pay for our work. And one is ticket sales and the other is individual donors. We've had to lean really heavily on our individual donors in these years since the pandemic hit. And with audiences really coming back, we want to increase the amount of our revenue that's coming from ticket sales, and adding some performances is going to be key to that. So thinking, which of these shows, can we come up with a couple shows as we plan each season that we could entertain the idea of an extension was a big factor for us.
I would say another factor too, Jen, is the technical elements. And mm-hmm. we do try to balance that. We work with the same construction company, Spotlight Construction, and our technical director, Aaron Sewell, is always with us. Our props director, Jolie Sarajian is always with us. So I like to well, this is going to be a really hard show, but I promise the next one is going to be a little easier. But mm-hmm. we know things like Gaslight has to be a Victorian parlor. And it has to have gas lights that go up and down. That is really important. Maybe Dakar is a little bit less in terms of scenic elements. And then you've got First Lady of Television that has cameras that somehow needs to go from the kind of the set of the Goldbergs into, doing quotes that nobody can see, into real life of Gertrude Berg. So that we don't like to do oftentimes, like three major scenic elements in a row, for instance. That's awfully hard on our people. And so that also oftentimes dictates the order of these plays.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. I mean, every time I talk about this slate, I get excited. This conversation is no exception. As much as I'm enjoying that we have just closed our last main stage show of this season, and we've got our New Works Festival and all kinds of other things coming up, but we are looking at a couple of months of a slightly minusculely more calm pace in the forward office. But this conversation has me beyond eager to get to August and the start of rehearsals for Steady She Goes to kick off this past as Prologue season. I think we can probably say that is it for this conversation. I think we did the job here. We talked about the season and why we chose it. I hope for the handful of people listening who may not already be subscribers, if you are local, I hope you're rushing to your computer to grab a subscription right now. And regardless, wherever you are listening from, I will say that is all for this episode of Theater Forward, a conversation about theater in Wisconsin, the Midwest, and America. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Jenna Poff-Gray.
I'm Julie Swenson.
And I'm Mike Fisher. Our podcast is produced by Scott Hayden, who's a story all himself, and it's wonderful. And you can follow us or share your thoughts, thanks to Scott, on Facebook. That's at Theater Forward. Theater is always spelled with ER. It's got history on its side.
And if you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe to us and leave a comment. We would love to hear from you.
We're so grateful to have you listening, and we will be back soon for another Theater Forward conversation.